Some stories don't ask us to admire strength, they ask us to admire kindness. In a world consumed by war, loss, and the endless cycle of despair, NieR Replicant introduces us to a boy unlike any other. A boy who was born with a power so terrifying that he spent most of his life believing he could never look another person in the eyes. A child who lived in isolation, surrounded by books instead of friends, silence instead of laughter, and fear instead of hope. Yet despite every reason to shut himself off from the world, despite losing his family, despite sacrificing his own humanity, despite becoming something he could barely recognize, he never stopped choosing compassion. Emil's story isn't simply one of tragedy. It's the story of someone who continually gave pieces of himself, even so that the people he loved could keep moving forward. When most people think about heroes in NieR Replicant, they often think of NieR's relentless determination, Kaine's unwavering resolve, or perhaps even Vice's wisdom and wit. But Emil represents something entirely different. He reminds us that true courage isn't measured by the monsters we defeat. Sometimes is measured by our willingness to remain kind after life has taken everything from us. Today, we're taking a closer look at one of NieR Replicant's most beloved characters, a boy whose heart remained unchanged even as his body transformed beyond recognition. This is the story of Emil. The boy who feared himself. Before Emil ever met NieR, before he smiled alongside Kaine and Vice, before he became the skeletal companion that so many players remember, he was simply a lonely child. But to understand Emil, we have to go back long before the events of NieR Replicant. He was simply a boy at an age where humanity stood on the brink of extinction. As the world struggled against the spread of the white chlorination syndrome, countless experiments were conducted in the desperate hope of preserving mankind's future. One of those experiments would forever change the lives of two siblings, Emil and his older sister Halua. Both children became unwilling subjects in experiments surrounding powerful magical weapons. Halua's immense magical abilities eventually spiraled beyond anyone's control, transforming her into a monstrous force capable of destroying everything around her. Emil, however, was given a different burden: his eyes. Rather than possessing overwhelming destructive power like his sister, Emil was cursed with the ability to petrify anything he looked upon. Friend, enemy, human. It didn't matter. One careless glance and they would become stone. Imagine living every single day knowing that something as simple as making eye contact could destroy another person's life. Something most of us never think twice about. A smile, a glance across the room, meeting someone's eyes while saying hello. For Emil, those ordinary moments became impossible. Instead of experiencing childhood surrounded by friends, he spent his life hiding behind a blindfold. Not because he wanted to, because he believed he had to. And perhaps that's the greatest tragedy of Emil's childhood. It wasn't just that he was alone. It was that he genuinely believed his existence was dangerous to everyone around him. His mansion became less of a home and more of a prison. Its grand halls echoed with silence. Its beautiful architecture couldn't hide the loneliness trapped within its walls. Books became his companions. The butler serving the state became one of the few constants in his life. But no amount of knowledge, no amount of wealth, could ever replace something as simple as having someone your own age to laugh with, to share stories with, to simply be yourself around. For years, that was Emil's reality. Until one day, a young man searching for a lunatic walked through the doors of that lonely mansion. Someone looking for who was responsible in contacting his sister. And for the very first time, Emil who met someone who wasn't afraid of him. Someone who saw more than the curse covering his eyes. Someone who simply saw a boy. And although NieR may have only been searching for someone who was contacting his sister, he unknowingly planted something far more important: hope. The first time Emil felt like he belonged. For someone who has spent years believing he was a danger to everyone around him, NieR's arrival changed everything. What's remarkable isn't that NieR immediately trusted Emil. It's that he treated him like anyone else. There was no fear, no hesitation, no disgust, just kindness. And for someone who has spent most of his life deprived of genuine companionship, that kindness meant everything. As Vice, ever the skeptic, questioned Emil's intentions, and Kaine remained understandably guarded, NieR chose to judge Emil by his actions rather than by the burden he carried. That simple act of acceptance became the foundation of a friendship that would define the rest of Emil's life. As the group ventured deeper into the mystery surrounding Halua, Emil began revealing pieces of himself that had remained hidden behind the walls of his mansions for years, or discovering forgotten memories that trauma blocked in the past. He wasn't just intelligent, he was curious, gentle, awkward, almost childlike in the way he spoke. There was an innocence about Emil that felt untouched by the cruelty of the world, despite everything the world had already done to him. It's one of the reasons so many players immediately connected with him. He wasn't pretending to be brave. He wasn't trying to be the strongest person in the room. He simply wanted friends. Friends he could laugh with, travel beside, protect. For perhaps the first time in his life, Emil experienced what it felt like to belong. But NieR Replicant has never been a story that allows happiness to last for long. Eventually, the group discovered the terrible truth hidden beneath the mansion. The part where trying to save Kaine from her petrification, years of looking at books, and finally a clue leading to the mysteries down below. Halua was still alive, or rather, what remained of her. The experiments that had consumed her years had transformed her into something beyond recognition. She wasn't the sister Emil remembered, she had become a living weapon. a being whose immense power threatened everyone around her. And suddenly, Emil found himself facing an impossible choice. Continue running from the past, or confront the sister he has spent years mourning, and then the remembrance of what had happened in the past. What makes this moment so heartbreaking isn't simply the battle itself, it's Emil's perspective. Despite everything Halua had become, he never stopped seeing her as his sister. He didn't hate her, he didn't fear her, he pitied her, he loved her. Because beneath the monstrous form, he still remembered the girl who had once protected him. The sister who had never asked for any of this. As the battle reached its climax, Halua made one final decision. Recognizing the love her younger brother still carried for her, she entrusted her remaining power to Emil. Not as a curse, but as a final gift. A final act of love between siblings who have both been robbed of their childhood. Yet gifts often come with a price, and Emil was about to pay one greater than he could have ever imagined. The price of becoming a hero. There are moments in NieR Replicant that forever change the course of his characters' lives. For NieR, it's the loss of Yona. For Kaine, it's a lifetime spent fighting against hatred, both from others and from the shades within herself. And for Emil, it was the moment he chose to sacrifice himself. After inheriting Halua's immense magical power, Emil finally possessed the strength to protect the people he cared about, while also saving Kaine from her petrification. But power in NieR is never free. Every gift demands something in return. As the group confronted the overwhelming threat before them, Emil realized there was only one way to ensure everyone's survival. He would unleash the full extent of his newfound power. Not once, not twice, but in this moment, maybe around those few times, in the latter years, more often than not. Knowing exactly what it would cost him, and without hesitation, he did it. In an instant, the gentle boy who had once hidden behind a blindfold, the child who spent years afraid of hurting others, was transformed into something almost unrecognizable. His flesh was gone, his youthful face disappeared, his body became little more than a living skeleton. It's one of the most visually shocking transformations in the entire game, not because it was grotesque, but because of what it represented. Everything Emil had feared losing, he lost. His appearance, his innocence, as he recalled his past memories and trauma, the chance to live what anyone would consider a normal life. Yet something remarkable happened. While Emil's body changed completely, his heart never did. That's what makes this transformation so powerful. Many stories use physical transformation to symbolize someone becoming colder, harder, more ruthless. Here did the exact opposite. Emil becomes less human on the outside, only to prove how deeply human he remains on the inside. Even after waking up in a body that no longer resembled the boy he once was. He didn't ask, why me? He didn't blame NieR. He didn't blame Kaine. He didn't curse the world for taking everything from him. Instead, his first concern was whether his friends were safe, whether they could continue their journey, whether everyone else was okay. Think about that for a moment. Imagine waking up one day to discover that your reflection no longer resembles the person you've always known. That every part of your identity has been stripped away. Most people would struggle to recognize themselves. Some might even lose hope altogether. But Emil, he adapts, not because it doesn't hurt, but because protecting the people he loves matters more to him than mourning what he's lost. And perhaps that's Emil's greatest act of courage. Not defeating powerful enemies, not wielding extraordinary magic, but refusing to allow unimaginable suffering to change the person he chose to be. From this point forward, Emil continues traveling beside NieR and Kaine, still laughing, still offering encouragement, still finding moments of warmth in a world growing darker with every passing step. Because Emil had come to understand something profound. Well, our humanity isn't defined by the face we wear. It's defined by the choices we make. And every choice Emil made was rooted in compassion. A heart that refused to change. If Emil's story had ended with his transformation, it would have already been one of the most tragic stories in NieR Replicant. But that's not where his journey ends. In many ways, it's where his true character begins to shine. As NieR's journey continues toward the Shadow Lord, the battles only became more dangerous. The enemies became stronger, sacrifices became greater, and the weight each member of the group carried grew heavier with every step. Yet through it all, Emil remained Emil. It's easy to overlook that because visually, he's almost an entirely different character. When players think of Emil, many immediately picture the floating skeleton with the oversized smile and glowing eyes. But underneath that appearance, he's still the same shy boy who welcomes strangers into his mansion. The same child who desperately wanted friends. The same young man who believed other people deserved happiness, even if it came at his own expense. That's what makes Emil so unique. He doesn't become stronger because he abandons his compassion. He becomes stronger because he refuses to. Throughout the remainder of the journey, Emil continually places himself between danger and the people he loves. Not because he thinks he's invincible, but because after everything he's already lost, he can't bear the thought of losing them too. And that's something I think often gets overlooked. Emil isn't fearless, he's terrified. He's experienced loneliness, loss, change. He's watched his sister disappear before his eyes. He sacrificed the body he was born with. He lost his memories. He knows better than anyone what it feels like to lose, yet he continues moving forward anyway. That is courage. By the time the group reaches the Shadow Lord's castle, none of them are the same people they were when this journey began. NieR has become consumed by his determination to save Yona. Kaine has spent years battling not only the world's hatred but the darkness within herself. Vice has grown from an arrogant, sarcastic grimoire into a loyal friend willing to sacrifice everything. And Emil? Emil has become living proof that our appearance doesn't define our humanity. Even in the game's darkest moments, he continues looking toward the people beside him instead of dwelling on himself. It's almost as if Emil quietly accepted something the others hadn't yet fully realized. That life rarely allows us to remain who we once were. Every hardship changes us. Every loss leaves its marks. The question isn't whether we'll change. The question is, what parts of ourselves are we willing to protect? For Emil, the answer was always his heart. But Emil's story doesn't truly end when the Shadow Lord falls. In fact, one of the most meaningful acts of kindness doesn't happen until ending E. After NieR makes the impossible decision to sacrifice his every existence in order to save Kaine, the world itself begins to forget he ever lived. His name, his memories, his place in history, as though he had never existed at all. Yet beneath the divine tree, within the forest of myth where memories themselves are woven together, Emil once again chooses to help after he sacrificed himself at the Shadow Lord's castle, and in the time he had to regain all of his remaining body parts or extra body parts to help Kaine. By this point, he's changed yet again. He now inhabits a new body, one marked with 4 arms, a visual reminder that time has continued to reshape him, even after everything he endured. But despite those changes, his purpose remains exactly the same. Together with Kaine, he ventures into the memories hidden within the divine tree, helping her reclaim the person the world had erased, helping her remember NieR. And I find something quietly beautiful about that. Emil isn't searching for recognition. He isn't asking the world to remember what he sacrificed. He's simply making sure that someone else doesn't lose the person they love. Even in the final chapters of NieR Replicant, Emil's last defining act is one of selflessness, and somehow that feels perfectly fitting. More than a tragic character. There are countless tragic characters throughout gaming. Characters who lose everything, characters who sacrifice themselves, characters who carry impossible burdens. But tragedy alone isn't what makes Emil unforgettable. It's who he chooses to become because of it. So often, stories tell us that suffering creates strength, that pain hardens us, that loss makes us colder. In the NieR universe, ask a different question. What if true strength isn't becoming harder? What if true strength is refusing to let hardship take away our ability to love? That's Emil. Every transformation he experiences changes his body, but never his heart. He begins the story hiding his eyes because he's afraid of hurting others. He ends his story helping restore the memories of the very friend the world had forgotten. Those two moments, separated by countless years of pain and sacrifice, are connected by one unchanging truth. Emil never stopped caring, even when it hurt, even when it cost him everything. And maybe that's why so many of us remember him long after the credits roll. Not because of his magic, not because of his design, not even because of the sacrifices he made. We remember Emil because he reminds us of the kind of person we hope we be if life asks the impossible of us. Someone who continues choosing kindness, someone who continues believing in friendship, someone who refuses to let bitterness become their legacy. One of my favorite details about ending E isn't actually the reunion between NieR and Kaine, it's what happens around it, or rather, who isn't there. After helping Kaine reclaim the memories that should have been lost forever, Emil quietly fades from the spotlight. The final reunion belongs to NieR and Kaine, and Emil lets it. Emil and Vice, even when Vice helped Kaine out as well in that area of ending E, they weren't around in that final scene. There's no demand for recognition, no expectation of gratitude, no desire to make the moment about himself. He simply ensures his friends receive the happiness they fought so hard to find. Then he steps aside. If that isn't Emil in a single moment, I don't know what is. Perhaps that's why his story has stayed with so many players for over a decade. Because Emil teaches us something that extends far beyond the world of NieR. We can't always choose what happens to us. We can't always prevent loss. We can't always protect the people we love from pain, but we can choose who we become because of it. Emil chose compassion again and again and again. So while NieR Replicant may be remembered for its heartbreaking twists, unforgettable soundtrack, and one of the most emotionally devastating stories in gaming, for me, its greatest reminder is found in one quiet, gentle soul. A boy who feared looking people in the eyes, yet spent the rest of his life helping others see hope. And perhaps that was Emil's greatest gift. Not his magic, not his power, but the unwavering kindness he carried through a world that gave him every reason to let go. Thank you all so much for joining me on another narrative dive. If Emil's story resonated with you, I'd love to hear what part of his journey left the greatest impression on you. Did his sacrifice, his unwavering optimism, his second to final act in Shadowlord's Castle, or ending E stay with you the most? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. And if you connected with this, I've set up a small coffee page tied to the channel. No pressure at all. It's just there for anyone who wants to support what I'm building here.